Thank you for having me. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, that's spot on, absolutely spot on. So could see the slides as well. So over to you. Thank you.
All right, brilliant. First of all, thank you, SDI, for having me deliver this talk to you. It's indeed an honor and a privilege. What I'm going to be doing is distilling some of the experiences that I've had in about 20 years worth of consulting engagements and projects. Most of them centered around the implementation of some sort of ITSM tool, stretching as far back as Remedy 4 point whatever it was in the midst of time. Some of you might be wincing in recollection, and I share those scars. So what I've done is distilled a lot of the things that I found to consistently work, and lack of those things consistently lead to project risks or indeed failures, and to share those lessons with you today. I know David said we're a bit short on time, so I'm probably going to speed up very slightly, but if I'm going too fast, David, please let me know and I can slow down. So I don't have my webcam on, but that's my mug. And apart from my love of service management and working for Axelos as the ITIL product ambassador, I'm also a big comic book fan, a big hard rock heavy metal fan. That's my Twitter handle, although I'm taking a bit of an extended Twitter break these days. You can also find me on LinkedIn, same tag, /in/blowboy. And if you do want to connect with me, I'm more than happy to connect with you, but just include a note saying that you saw this talk or you'd like to connect with me to find out more, or whatever it might be. So let's start talking about tool implementations. And I'm going to start by borrowing one of the guiding principles that we've written about quite extensively in the ITIL 4 body of knowledge, and that is focus on value. It's one of those one of the 7 guiding principles. There's no order of preference to or priority to the guiding principle, but I think a lot of people tend to put this one as or talk about this one as being the most important. Whether or not you agree with this one being the most important, we can all agree it's a pretty important topic. And when we're looking at this specifically for tool implementations, we need to ask ourselves, whom are we creating value for? It could be the service desk, it could be our users, it could be the platform team, could also be audit and compliance, as David mentioned earlier, could be the finance and procurement. A lot of these teams, a lot of these groups might not even be using the tool that we're implementing, but we still have to be able to create value for them, because if we're not able to give enough value to audit and compliance, we create other sorts of risks in the organization. If we're not able to demonstrate value to finance and procurement in their activities, then they face other challenges upstream or downstream. So value is not just for the people who are actually touching the tool, who are using the tool on a day-to-day basis. It could be value for a whole host of other stakeholders in your company. And if you ignore them, or if you don't cater to their needs, you might create risks for the project or for the implementation. Now, in a lot of cases, these groups don't get involved with your project or involved with your implementation effort. They delegate their authority to the project, to the PMO. They may publish a list of policies and regulations and seek to enforce them, but they may not be involved on a day-to-day basis in your implementation initiative. But it's important to keep them in mind as you work through implementing your solution. The second tip that I found that works consistently is to think about your tool as a product, and think about managing a product rather than managing a project. Now, what I mean by this, one of the ways in which we can see this happening is over time, we can see that we have a huge ramp up of resource to, consultants, developers, engineers, whatever it might be, to design and implement the solution. And at some point, we've crossed that hump. We start to reduce the resources that are available to continue the work. In some cases, almost to the point where we completely shut down the project and disperse those resources back into their teams. And if we're using consultants, we let those implementation consultants go. But what this means is the next time we're trying to do something, we've got to ramp up from zero, essentially. Instead, borrowing an idea from what Agile software development has talked about and evangelized for the last several years, if we instead think about creating a stable product team, whose role it is to manage the use of the product, develop new incremental features, be the first port of call when things are going wrong with the tool set, and so on, then we can find that we are able to invest in continuous iterative development of features and fixes. And as and when required, we can still ramp up to bring on additional resources to augment that stable product team. And these are essentially creating a split between a stable product team and a flexible project team. And this allows you to continuously monitor the usage of various features, be more reactive to fixes, be more responsive to requests for new features, and so on. Moving swiftly on, if we were to combine another two models from ITIL, the guiding principle of progress iteratively with feedback with the continuous improvement model, what we're essentially talking about is creating short iterative cycles of features and fixes. In other words, in a way, agile software development. Whether or not you choose to call it agile, whether you choose to write epics and stories, or whether you're doing product specifications or requirements documentation, regardless of the mechanisms you're using, you need to be able to combine this passion for continual improvement with with an approach of taking small steps, understanding the feedback to those small steps, and adjusting your approaches accordingly. And what this allows you to do is to focus on what's called MVP and MMP. Now, there are a lot of acronyms that I've seen floating around the space, but MVP is minimum viable product, and MP is minimum marketable product. The distinction essentially is that the minimum viable product is a small feature, or perhaps even a small set of features, that allows the development team to quickly learn, validate hypotheses, and so on. Whereas the MMP, minimum marketable product, is a more robust set of capabilities that those features are able to deliver that can be launched publicly. So you can tinker with your ITSM or your service desk tool project to try to refine how different things work using a small subset of super users, for example. And then when you hit a point of an MMP, you're able to launch that product to the wider user group. But we also are able to capitalize on this approach of iterative progression and continual improvement by understanding that sometimes of the features that we build themselves have a shelf life, and the benefits might actually start to dip the other way. In fact, we're having a feature in place might start to reduce the overall benefit offered to the end user. Legacy technologies, legacy processes, or legacy procedures. Maybe we fail to recognize the shift to BYOD computing and requiring everybody to log in using a VPN and those sorts of things. So there is a possibility of recognizing the end of life of a feature and taking steps to make sure that we're not bleeding benefits, if you will. We're not losing overall benefits. I'll move swiftly on because of time. The next one that I've found is to be able to cultivate super users and local champions. Now, this is not new to the service desk community. It's not new to the ITSM community. But I think the step that we miss is that we don't use the super users and champions to contextualize the messages that we're trying to deliver. So when I'm rolling out a service desk tool, I might want to have my office manager use certain words, phrases, language, tone, etc. that makes that resonates with the facilities management user group. I might want to ask somebody in my sales team to craft similar messaging in a way that will resonate with the sales users, the users from the sales department. There may be different problems that facilities faces versus sales, and being able to contextualize the message and using those super users and champions to promote those specific narratives is what I found helps create greater traction and greater adoption of the solutions that we deliver. Again, moving on, the other thing I'd say is don't rely on a document on a shared drive. Now, initially I said don't rely on a document on SharePoint, and I thought that was unfair to SharePoint and all the lovely people that work at Microsoft. So I'm just going to say don't rely on a document on a shared drive. It's very nice to end your project with a bunch of artifacts, a bunch of Word documents that somebody sticks on a shared drive, but guess what? Nobody's going to look at them, especially over time. And that is the harsh reality. Instead, what we need to do is upfront invest a little bit more to be able to create multiple formats of the same user training. That could be video, that could be one-on-one training with a super user, that could be a webinar or an online screen share like we're doing. I've done projects where I've not only delivered face-to-face training of the tool set that I've implemented, but I've also taken the time to record screen captures and publish videos with subtitles and lower third instructions highlighting how the tool is supposed to be used. So don't be reluctant, or make the business case, I should say, to invest in multiple user training formats, with the caveat that you need to make sure that whatever those formats and channels are, you're reiterating and reinforcing the same message, rather than trying to adopt different examples or different use cases from one medium to the other. You need to have that consistency of communication. Before I move on to the next one, I'd like to introduce another concept from ITIL 4, this time not from Foundation, but from a book called Drive Stakeholder Value, which I'd encourage everyone here to at least have a read through or learn more about. This diagram that you see in front of you is called the customer journey, and it talks about how customers and service providers go through a series of interactions along a journey or a journey map. And how those service interactions or those touch points create and change perception. Again, this is not new to any of us here, but it's a model that we used as a central concept when we wrote Drive Stakeholder Value. Now, if we think about this model or apply this model, we can see that as we take different actions, or as we say or not say certain things, we change the touch points and the perceptions along those touch points. So what does this lead me to? This leads me to one of the big things that I always talk about in any tool implementation project, which is don't remove human cognition and empathy from your tool set. The diagram you see in front of you is a lovely thing called the empathy map canvas. It's not an ITIL concept. I've put a link below, or you can just go to your favorite search engine and search for empathy map canvas. You can print it on like a big A3 sheet of paper, an A1 sheet of paper, stick it up on a wall as part of your workshopping with your team, and you ask yourself, well, who are we trying to empathize with in our daily work? Or regardless of what tool set we use, whether it's a new solution, whether it's face-to-face communication, whatever it might be, who are we empathizing with? What are they trying to do? What are they seeing, feeling, saying? What are they doing? And equally, how are they thinking? What are those perceptions like? But equally, we can flip this around and say, well, what are we thinking? What are we doing? What are we saying? What are our pains? And you're able to then combine two sides of a conversation. And if you're able to understand both sides of that conversation, especially if you're collaborating with a sample of those users, they get to see what you're feeling and doing and hearing and saying and so on. And you get to see what they are feeling and seeing and doing and saying and so on. And that then leads to empathy, because you're encouraging two-way communication, a two-way understanding of each other's pains, pain points and triggers. So, you could say, what am I saying to them? Flip that around. What are they trying to tell me? If you ask your customer to articulate, if you articulate what you're saying to your customer, you can ask your customer, well, how does this land? What do you think we're trying to tell you? Equally, if you ask your customer, I'm going to take, or say to your customer or your users, I'm going to do this, then you can ask your customer, what are you experiencing as I'm taking that action? So again, you're balancing views rather than imposing a view upon someone. The last tip, I think this is the last tip, in the interest of time, that I'll leave you with is don't turn off other channels of communication. This is one of the things I've seen time and time again in a lot of ITSM tool implementations where we've got a shiny new portal, let's just turn off emails to the service desk. All that does is lead to unhappy customers. What you need to be able to do is to instead of turning off the other channels, disincentivize the other channels and incentivize the channel that you are trying to direct people to. That way you're giving them the carrot rather than the stick. So you could say that, look, requests or incidents logged via our self-service portal will be dealt with sooner than tickets that are logged if you were to call in or if you were to email in. And that incentivizes the behavior you're trying to get to rather than imposing the behavior you're trying to get to. You're not turning off the channels of communication that users are already used to, that they've established, that they may prefer, and so on. So you incentivize rather than impose. So just to wrap all this up, and I apologize for going over, David, but to wrap this up, focus on value for multiple stakeholders, manage a product and projects together, invest in multiple training formats, retain human cognition and empathy. I'm not sure if we have time for the poll, David. I'll need your steer here if we have time for the poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, actually, no problem at all.
Great. So I think David's now started up the poll, or Holly has. You should see this question on your screen. I've shared a lot of tips today, and I think certainly for David, Holly, and myself, we'd be interested in finding out what you would like to know a little bit more about. If we have time for Q&A, perhaps this can be used as a way to maybe kick off a question, or it might serve as a way for SDI and Axelos to collaborate further to bring you more guidance and information and presentations and good quality content. So we've got 5 options. Which of today's tips would you like to explore more and learn about? Focusing on value for multiple stakeholders, managing products or projects, cultivating those champions and super users, investing in multiple formats and channels, customer journey maps and standpoints. Oh, sorry, the last 2 are combined, I think, in the poll. It's customer journey maps, touch points, and empathy models. I apologize, David. I didn't update the slide.
No, not at all. I think yeah, it's just the limitations of the tool, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. So we included that. No, that's absolutely fine. So we're up to 40% of the listeners who have voted now. So we'll just leave it a bit longer. I mean, yeah, I think it's just the nature of today's topic. I really think it is. You know, it's an awful lot to cover, an awful lot to discuss, and yeah, we've run over a little bit, but not too much. We are in break time, but yeah, that's really interesting. I think certainly, you know, when we talk about best practice, developing best practice, we'll probably see some stuff, or talk about some stuff on the panel discussion now about, you know, what should we be thinking about as things are changing, and that product mentality. Does that work, or have you seen it working in teams? So if we're talking about the service desk as a product, right? Can it translate into something directly like that? So when you've not got maybe an implementation of a tool, but you've got something that's a little bit softer, a human at the end of it, does it work like that as well?
I think so, because part of managing a tool set like a product, I mean, like I said, regardless of what method you use, it's about being more responsive to the needs of your stakeholders, needs of your user group. So it does require meeting with your users quite frequently, understanding what their pain points are, understanding how quickly you can deliver the fixes to those pain points, maybe by sort of saying, look, you know, we can't develop a massive solution in the next month, but maybe in the next 2 weeks, I'll give you 10% of it. 2 weeks after that, I'll give you another 10%. 2 weeks after that, we'll be able to give you 50%. So it opens up better chance of communication. It sets the expectations correctly. It shows the product team as being more collaborative and responsive. And I found it always leads to happier customers. I've managed these implementation projects as sort of product management type of in using product management techniques, but also as a consultant. But then also when I had for lack of a better phrase, a proper job in the corporate world, I was the product owner for ServiceNow for a number of years, and I instilled these sorts of ways of working with my offshore development teams, for example, or my outsourced development teams with my internal stakeholders and the wider organization. So I think moving from that project-centric funding and resourcing model to a product-centric funding and resourcing model is extremely powerful.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, we've got some results, look, and there they are. So I think, yeah, as you can see there, journey mapping, and that's been a key theme today. I think actually there's a lot about that progressive approach to thinking more, granularly. That's not even a word, but in whatever that word is, right? Yeah, in depth. There we are. Yeah. More in depth about the customer journey, and I love that because I connect to that. I connect to that as a customer, but also as somebody who wants to deliver a brilliant service. And it's really interesting to see that move over the last few years, where people have thought more about what it is to be delivering the service and the customer at the center part of that, in a centric point, rather than what an SLA is in a green and red point. I think it's brilliant, honestly, and more power to us all as a community and a group of people that deliver that kind of outcome, I think.
I absolutely agree. I'll go into sort of wrap up. There's just a couple of links to share with the audience. But to your point, David, there was an article on the BBC website that I remember reading yesterday, which was customers are fed up about companies using COVID as a excuse for poor service. And 18 months since close to 18 months since the last lockdown, certainly one full annual budget cycle's worth of time since lockdown started. We still have people waiting on hold hearing due to COVID, we are running with shorter staff or whatever. It's like, come on, guys, we've had a year to try to solve this. It's strange.
It says a lot, though, about the organizations that's providing the service, though. I really think if you cut it back, is an old adage about you want to know how good a service is in any organization around the service desk, any organization, because you will know from that interaction how good a service you will get as a consumer for whatever that organization is delivering. I think that says an awful lot about the organizations who use COVID as a reason why they can't deliver specific service or the quality that they think they should. It says an awful lot for me.
Absolutely agree. All right, so a couple of things to share before I leave you to the rest of the afternoon. If you have a service management story you'd like to share, you'd like to publish your own thoughts and experiences, then please do get in touch with us, and we'd love to collaborate with you as well as our friends at SDI to publish, whether it's a case study or a blog post or whatever it might be. So please do get in touch. And the last thing to say is, if you're looking for more information about some of the concepts I've covered off today, such as the guiding principles, which I've touched upon in a few places, there's a link in this deck that will take you to the Axelos website, which talks about a little bit more about those guiding principles. And if you want to find out more about the customer journey maps, and indeed a lot of the good stuff that we've written about in the Drive Stakeholder Value book, again, here's a link to a landing page on the Axelos website that will tell you a lot more about the guidance there. So without any further ado, thank you for your time. Please do connect with me, either Twitter or LinkedIn, but send me a note. And great. With that, David, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure, Akshay. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to move on. We've missed break, but that's okay. I think I'm okay. I think I've nibbled on a couple of packets of crisps during the last hour, so I'm okay. I'm hoping that all our listeners have as well. Okay, so yeah, we're going to.